I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. We have a great episode for you today. We are really in the final stretch of the campaign, less than a week before what I think is the most consequential election of my lifetime. And one of the most interesting developments of this election so far has been to see the media, specifically the CBC, and their reaction. I believe they're losing control of their hold over the country. For decades, they have been the arbiters of truth, the self-appointed arbiters of what is news and what isn't. And basically, from that debate that happened last week onwards, I think they're starting to realize that they don't have that grip anymore. They're losing control over the country, over their place as being the ones who gets to determine what is news and what isn't. And they no longer get to shape the narrative of the campaign. They've lost control of the narrative, and it is social media and influencers and content creators and independent journalists who are stepping up and having a bigger and bigger influence. I hope this will be the last election campaign that the CBC has any type of influence and control. I hope that they get defunded after this campaign. And I really think that they're starting to realize that they might not have a future in this country. And that is why they are behaving in such an unhinged way. So to talk about this a little bit more in depth, I'm very pleased today to be joined by one of my favorite people in the independent media space, and that is Ezra Levant. He's a founder of The Rebel. He's sort of the godfather of this entire movement of independent online media. Ezra, thank you so much for joining the show. It's great to have you.
Wow, thank you for this super friendly introduction. I'm normally referred to like a pebble in someone's shoe. So this is a change of pace for me. Thank you.
Well, okay, so it's been a week now since those debates, and I just think they were so consequential. And I think that, look, Pierre Poilievre did a great job. Mark Carney did a terrible job. I think that Mark Carney lost the election on Wednesday night at the French debate, or if not Wednesday night, then Thursday night. His flat responses, his tone deafness, even just that question that he asked to Pierre Poilievre, asking him why he doesn't have a security clearance and giving Poilievre the stage to debunk the entire conspiracy theory behind it. I think that he could have been heading towards a government, majority government. And I don't know if he's lost the entire election, but I don't think that he's going to get a majority government. The polls are starting to reflect that. So I want to get your reaction to the debates themselves, but I think something more interesting or equally as interesting happened in the debates. And that is really watching the CBC and all of the media realize that they don't have control anymore, that the independent press is here to stay. We do have influence over the country. We represent millions, dare I say tens of millions of Canadians are more interested in the questions that we're asking and the way that we present the news than the old guard. They're starting to realize that. So what are your reflections on both those issues, Ezra?
I think the debates were good. I think they were illuminating, and I think it was the first time Canadians had seen Mark Carney, really, and I think he underperformed a bit. That said, I don't think there was any particular disasters for him, so I don't think it was quite, I would say it wasn't quite as bad as how you've described it, but you're right, the Mark Carney balloon has started to deflate a bit, and perhaps over the next few days, if that trend continues, it's a possibility you might have a conservative minority. Right now, I still think it's a liberal minority. But you're right. To me, much more interesting was what was happening behind the scenes at the debates. As you know, in 2019, both True North and Rebel News were banned. We both went to court, and it was an amazing ruling by the federal court that it was unconstitutional. It violated our charter rights for the government agency called the Debates Commission to keep us out. See, Justin Trudeau nationalized the debates. He turned them into a government agency so he could control them. He even put one of the Kielburgers on the board. It was really weird. But by making it a national government agency, he made it subject to the Charter of Rights. They tried again to keep us out in 2021. Again, we went to court, and again, the court ordered them to accredit us. Actually, back then, the court ordered them to accredit 11 different Rebel journalists. So here we are in 2025, and we reached out in advance to the Debates Commission and basically said, do you want to do this again, or do you want to grow up a bit? So they accredited 5 Rebel News journalists, and I know that Juno had a team there. I was really pleased to see your team there. They were, first of all, it felt great to have friends and allies, and not just you guys, but Western Standard was there. There were other reporters. I don't want to try and list them all, but it felt like there was a growing cohort, whereas it was quite lonely 5 years ago. Now there's a growing group of, I don't even know everybody, which is a pleasure when the movement grows so much that you don't know everyone. And here's the interesting thing. You guys had some really good questions that I would say were a little bit edgy, which is, I think, what a journalist should be towards a politician. The politicians didn't mind. Mark Carney answered you guys, your questions. I thought he actually answered them fairly well. He wasn't shocked by them. He didn't reject them. He answered them. He's a grown-up. He's not afraid to answer the questions. If he proposes to engage with Trump and Putin, I think he can handle Juno News. Same thing with Rebel News. Jagmeet Singh doesn't talk to us anytime. He's a bit of a powder that way, so no big deal. But the Bloc Québécois leader answered our questions, and Pierre Poilievre answered our questions. Here's my point that I'm making, Candice. All of the party leaders were fine with us being there. I did not hear a single complaint from any of the parties that we were allowed in. The complaints came from rival journalists. They came especially from the CBC, which basically launched a campaign to discredit and eject us. There was one moment, I don't know if you know this, Candice, the CBC complained privately to the commission and demanded that I be ejected because I had the temerity to ask a CBC journalist during a commercial break if I would have a chance to rebut his cascade of lies against us. The CBC thought I was so impertinent they tried to get me kicked out. They literally asked and demanded that we be ejected. None of the politicians felt that way. One last thing, and I don't know if you have this clip, but Adrienne Arsenault, who's a very senior reporter for the CBC, she was talking about Rebel News and you guys in particular, and in particular the question by Alex Zoltan, if I've got the name correctly, who asked about how many genders there are. And that's not a trick question. That goes to transgender policy. The UK Supreme Court just ruled that only biological men are men. This is a very live issue in the United States. It's absolutely relevant in Canada.
Well, they asked Pierre Poilievre about it 2 months ago, and there was no complaints after that question was asked.
Yeah. So you guys asked that question. It was well put. And by the way, I think he answered it okay, Mark Carney.
Well, he answered it,
Yeah. The rage from the other. Adrienne Arsenault said, people might think, what country are we in? And she also said these questions did not conform to what was talked about in the debates. And I'm thinking, you're giving it away. You're saying the quiet part out loud. Adrienne Arsenault, Rosemary Barton, and David Cochrane, the CBC triumvirate, had ruled that Rebel News and Juno News, our questions were not the right ones. It was clearly a content disagreement. And all the questions we asked were asked very politely. So it's not like we were even disruptive. Hey, quick point on that. We have a reporter named Drea Humphrey. And if I was a lefty, I would also say she's a woman of color who is Indigenous. In fact, she was the only black woman in the room, let me put it that way. She asked a question about residential schools that was off the official narrative. She asked Jagmeet Singh about that and about the wave of Christian churches being torched. And not only did Jagmeet Singh ignore it, but here's the thing, Candice, and I don't know if this would have been heard by people at home because I don't think it was picked up by the microphone. When Drea Humphrey, a dignified black journalist, asked this question of Jagmeet Singh, all these white liberal male feminists in the press room started heckling her. I swear to God, they were trying to disrupt her. They were trying to shout her down. You can't quite pick it up on the microphone. It was shocking. Same thing when Alexa Lavoie asked her question en français. I have never seen, it was demonic, the way they were hollering at her. And they say independent journalists are the disruptors and chaotic. It's so clear that this is their little club, and they hate the fact that we're eating their lunch. But you are right, Candice. They are losing their grip and their control, and I'm delighted to see it.
Well, I want to pick up on a couple of points that you made there because I could kind of hear a little bit of the heckling that was going on. And it did make me think that, this isn't just about who gets to the line first to ask the question, because it really is, it's open to everyone. And so the fact that they were very upset that Juno News got 2 questions to Mark Carney, it's literally just because our guys got up 10 minutes before the debate ended and stood in line, right? That's it. That's all it took. The fact that Rebel had 4, well, the CBC also had 4. You talked about the panel, and I do want to show it because I don't have the bit where Adrienne Arsenault is saying that she had to check if she was still in Canada. I played it on the show last week. I think that part's great in music. But I want to show this bit of the three of them, Adrian Arsenault, Rosemary Barton, and David Cochrane. And just the way that they're talking about it, to me, this clip just perfectly illuminates the point that we're trying to make here, which is that these people are losing their control over the country. So let's play that clip, please.
Just watching it, having watched the debate, David,
Yeah.
you know, the debate was one type of conversation. This feels very different.
I think the debate commission is going to need to be accountable for what's kind of happening here. They moved the time of the debate the day before. They kicked the Greens out the morning of, and they've opened up the scrums and the press access to a bunch of groups who sometimes are registered charities or have been defined by their owner as not actually a journalistic organization, or have been ruled by the federal court to not be a journalistic organization. And there are substantive follow-ups on these things for these leaders. They only get 10 minutes, and it's being monopolized by people who are asking on issues that are not central to the campaign, and certainly were not central to this debate.
And we have about 30 seconds left. Anything of substance that you heard there policy-wise, or that you've heard tonight that you hadn't heard before?
Not in any of these scrums, because they are being taken over by other agendas, right? And not, I think, necessarily helping a broad swath of voters. Some people maybe do want to hear some of these questions and answers, but broadly, I don't think they represent sort of what the ballot box question is about. We can talk more, yeah.
Okay, so just a couple things as well that I want to point out about that exchange there. So you're right, Adrian Arsenault's talking about how these weren't the points from the debate. So clearly they believe that the establishment media gets to set the agenda for the entire election, and that's what you have to talk about. So the scrums have to be dominated by the exact same questions that were already covered in the debate, which to me doesn't make much sense. And then you have David Cochrane kind of try to explain to everyone what we were even doing there. And he totally gets his facts wrong, right? He's like, one of them is a registered charity. So I guess that's talking about True North. And then he also says a federal judge has determined that they're not journalists. Well, that's the opposite of the truth. Actually, the federal judge was the one, as you mentioned, in 2019 that ruled that we were journalists, and therefore we had to get let in. And then you have like a very somber Rosemary Barton come in, kind of again repeat the point that this isn't what the campaign's supposed to be about. And this is my favorite part. She says, other agendas have taken over. So she's kind of implying there that, you know, we have our agenda, the legacy media, the CBC agenda, and this is another agenda taking over to just ask questions that millions of Canadians would like to know. From my perspective, you had the debate, they missed a whole bunch of issues, right? They really want to talk about divisive social issues that hurt Pierre Poilievre. So they spent 10 minutes of the debate, Ezra, talking about abortion. This is a French debate. The last 10 minutes were on abortion, even though all of the candidates agree. I wish they didn't, but all of the candidates agree on that issue. So that's the type of social issue you're allowed to talk about, the ones that they've decided for the last 25 years to use as an attack against conservatives. You know, the entire craze over radical gender ideology, that's not allowed. The question about residential schools, I wish someone had asked that question to Mark Carney, right? During the English debate, he said to Jagmeet Singh, no, I don't believe that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians. I don't think we should use that word. I would like to know whether he believes that Canada committed genocide, because his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, said not only that Canada did commit genocide, but he said that Canada is committing genocide,
right,
like present tense, right?
Yeah.
So why don't we ask the leader of the Liberal Party whether he maintains that same view, right? They don't want to talk about the social issues that could harm the Liberals. And you also, just one final point, David Cochrane there was complaining about the Leaders Debate Commission. He doesn't like anything about them, so they're kind of lobbying. We saw there was an interview right before the English debate where he had the debates commissioner on, grilling him. How come you let these journalists in? You know, how did you let this happen? And there he's complaining that the Green Party didn't get let in. Okay, the Green Party didn't meet the requirements, right? The requirements have been set in stone for the last 2 election cycles. They objectively didn't meet those. Why does David Cochrane want the Green Party in so much? I'll tell you why I think. Because it helps Mark Carney. The more people on stage, the less Mark Carney has to talk, the less chance there is that he'll stick his foot in his mouth. The entire strategy of the Liberals and the CBC is run out the clock, right? They created a narrative. The narrative is Trump bad, coming against Canada, only Mark Carney can save us. And so their entire agenda is just to help Mark Carney run out the clock. And I think it's just so obvious. They've exposed themselves. And I mean, now we're at this point where we're seeing them sort of grasp their last grasp of power before they get put out. What do you think of all that?
Yeah, I mean, let me give you an example. I was thinking about this the other day. In the last 2 election cycles, the Conservative Party was the focus of the media rage over the carbon tax. Why won't you support the carbon tax? How dare you do this to the planet? And Andrew Scheer and Erin O'Toole answered. I don't think their answers were great, but it was such a central focus of the debates. As soon as Mark Carney says, oh, yikes, I better shuck off, I better jettison the carbon tax if I'm going to win, all of a sudden, the media that was saying this is the death of the climate, the death of our future, suddenly they show no interest in the subject whatsoever. Really? I mean, could you be more transparent in how partisan you are? That whole thing was just a way to get the Conservatives. And now that Mark Carney has flipped on the subject, they're not interested in it anymore. I really, being in that room, Candice, was amazing. I should say that about half the journalists in there were just regular folks doing their job. I sat next to a photographer from the Montreal Gazette. He couldn't care less. He was just there to take photos. I mean, there are some really normal people in journalism, but some of them are Antifa activists with a laptop. There was some nutbar from the Hill Times who started screaming, first at Keean Bexty and then at us, and some other kook at Ricochet. And you know, they were so disruptive, and I thought the word demonic came to mind. The way they went after Drea was demonic. And then I just thought, what is it? And here's my guess of what happened. First of all, I think some of them, like I say, are radical activists, and this was their January 6th moment. Oh, my God, independent journalists are storming in. I think, second of all, they've been radicalized. They've been convinced by the BS on the CBC that we are all the things they falsely accuse us of. So if we were in the room and a bunch of Klansmen came in with hoods, we would freak out and say, what the heck are you guys doing in here? That's how they've been trained and taught and brainwashed into thinking anyone right of center is. And finally, there's the fact that they know we get more views often than they do. I mean, I stopped counting how many views Rebel News got when we hit 2 billion. I mean, I like it when a video goes viral, but I don't even count anymore. I'm sure you're the same way. And I remember when we started Rebel News a decade ago, I had an inferiority complex. I said, oh, are we really even doing journalism? And we don't have the fancy sets, and we don't have the reach, but we do. And these guys are some artificial last refuge, and they're only there because they're propped up by the government. And that's why they're in panic mode. They know that we run circles around them. They know that we have the love of Canadians. We have to. We don't get government bailouts. And they know that if this election goes the wrong way for them, a lot of the people in that room may be unemployed because for them, their hobby and their politics are being subsidized. Juno, Countersignal, Western Standard, Rebel News, we live based on the support of our people. And the CBC can't say the same. And I think it's all these things combining. And we were in their safe place. And let me just throw one last thing. I know we don't have too much time, but there was this moment where Michel Cormier, the head of the Debates Commission, was doing the tour and getting beat up by all the regime journalists for letting us in. And it was in one interview he said, there's only so much I can do to limit the free press. He literally said that out loud. Other journalists were saying, why do you let the Rebel News in? He said, I agree with you. I didn't want to. But the court says I have to. I have to follow the law. Like he was apologizing. He was apologizing for allowing free speech. I don't know. These guys can't lose hard enough. I
agree. I mean, from my perspective, Ezra, it's just like good versus evil. It's so black and white. Like there's no gray here. It's like these people hate free speech and a free press, and yet they couldn't prevent it.
Imagine putting a guy in charge of a debates who says publicly, I wish I could do more to limit free speech. He said that. He really said that. That was his excuse when Radio Canada, the French CBC, was saying, why didn't you ban these guys? He said, guys, I tried.
Right. Okay, I want to get to just one other thing. I know we don't have you for much longer. I'm going to do this one, and then I want to quickly talk about the news and the 2 campaigns. But this was probably one of the most satisfying, delicious things that happened. So first, I'll show you after the French debate, Rosemary Barton accused your journalist, Drea Humphreys, of trafficking in misinformation, and she fact-checked her live on television, claiming that, yes, there have been remains of Indigenous children found in various places across the country. Let's play that clip.
have to sort of address the elephant in the room. How are these people chosen to answer these questions? And I don't know if either one of you have an answer for that, but I think there will be people at home saying, some of these seem like odd questions. Some of them aren't getting answered. How come we've heard so often from this one particular outlet? Any idea what's going on there?
There's three right-wing, very right-wing media, we can call them media, websites that are present in there. They get in line to ask a question like anybody else. Their accreditation has been approved by the Commission of Debates, and so they get the right to stand in line and ask a question that they choose to ask. In this case, you saw Mr. Singh, and this has been his position for some time, to refuse to answer questions. Rebel News in particular traffics in misinformation, facts, lack of facts, and as you heard in that question, which was woven with some truth and some things that weren't true. Yes, there have been burnings of Christian Catholic churches. Yes, there have been remains of Indigenous children found in various places around the country, which she misrepresented. We'll see if Mr. Poilievre gets any questions from right-wing organizations. I would suspect no.
As an aside, I love that they refuse to call us journalists, so they call us media websites. Very far right, she says. Okay, so to get to the good part, when she said that, I was going to fact check it, but then we got carried away with other things because we track this stuff pretty closely, Ezra, and every time they've done an excavation, which there haven't been very many, right? Most of the time, the industries behind the First Nations, unmarked grave thing, they really want to drum up the accusation. And then when it comes to the actual report, they bury it. They don't want it done. They don't want to excavate. They've never excavated in Kamloops where the initial 215 soil disturbances were found. And so when Rosemary Barton said that, I thought, she actually believes the propaganda. She believes the lies, because I think that she was in good faith trying to fact check because she believes that she knows the truth. And the reality is that she's not very well informed, Ezra, because yes, there have been some excavations. They have never found remains. They have never found remains. And so even the CBC, I'll give someone at the organization credit for this. This fact check popped up April 17th. So here, let me read it. This is what it says, buried at the bottom of a CBC news story, right? Rosemary Barton didn't have to apologize, but they did have to issue a correction for what she just said. Here it says, on April 16th, during a live broadcast following the French language federal election leaders debate on CBC News Network, chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton said, quote, yes, there have been remains of Indigenous children found in various places across the country, unquote. As CBC News has reported on multiple occasions, what several Indigenous communities across Canada have discovered on sites of some former residential schools are potential barrier sites or unmarked grave. So no, I mean, even in their correction, Ezra, they twist it and they manipulate it. They don't come right out and say it. Fact check, Rosemary Barton. They've never found any remains. They've never found any remains, and they're trying. They're desperately trying. So at least the CBC has admitted it. And I think, Ezra, this goes to show what a great question it was from Drea. And I wish that it was asked to Mark Carney as well. Hopefully we'll have that opportunity in the future.
Yeah. By the way, Drea Humphrey went to Kamloops, and she was puttering around. She actually bumped into the chief and put questions to her. I am certain Rosemary Barton hasn't gone to any lengths to find the truth. And for her to presume to be the arbiter of the truth is a bit much. Listen, one man's misinformation is another man's argument. These are unresolved issues. And this whole industry of fact-checking and misinformation is a way of saying you're not allowed to have a different opinion. Everything should be challengeable. I mean, we just came through the COVID-19, everything from where did the virus originate to do the vaccines work, to do vaccine mandates work, to should we violate civil liberties of people with the Emergencies Act. All of those things are controversies. And we allow controversies. Let truth and falsehood grapple. But for them to say, Rebel News traffics and misinformation, they shouldn't be allowed in at all, well, they get things wrong literally every day. Sometimes, I think you're right, this was misinformation, a mistake by Rosemary Barton. But in other cases, it's very much disinformation, deliberate spin in service of their master, Mark Carney. I'm not calling for the CBC to be banned from anything, and I wish they wouldn't call for me or you to be banned either. I think it shows how brittle their ideas are. If they had their way, they would ban us, and they would shut down independent websites through things like Bill C-63. And I'm quite worried that if Mark Carney wins again, I'm worried he will bring in those censorship laws, and he has intimated as much. So there's a lot at stake. You said this was the most consequential election of your lifetime. I believe that's true as well, and I'm a little bit worried.
Well, and this just goes to, again, the need for more independent questions, because why hasn't this been asked of Mark Carney? Why don't we know what his position on Trudeau government censorship laws are? We don't even know basic things, Ezra, like if he loses the election, will he stay on?
Yeah.
If
We don't know basic biographical things. When did he move back to Canada? Last year, he told the U.S. Congress, he was interrogated by the U.S. Congress for sort of price fixing and extortion of a carbon company. He was interrogated under oath by congressional lawyers. And he told them he lived in the United Kingdom. This was just a few months ago. When did he move back to Canada? Has he moved back to Canada? Where did he file his personal taxes? His health care card, is it an Ontario card or is it the NHS in the UK? Why have his wife and children not returned back to Canada? Why did he get 3 passports? Is he really going to give them up? I mean, those may sound like detailed questions, but I think we have the right to know. The man who was selected as our prime minister in a botched election, 400,000 people registered to vote in the Liberal leadership contest. 250,000 of those were disqualified. Only 150,000 out of 400,000 were allowed to vote. What's with that? And the results were statistically so improbable. And no one looked into it, and we're not allowed to ask questions. I assure you that the Chinese Communist Party took a great interest in his leadership vote. I know that because every week there's another emergency announcement by the Canadian intelligence services that China's meddling in our campaign. Well, I mean, imagine instead of just meddling with 11 individual MPs, imagine putting a Manchurian candidate right in the PMO. And I don't know the facts about it because he won't answer the facts. When was the last time Mark Carney spoke to the Chinese embassy or a Chinese diplomat? Do we know the answer to that? I think it's a valid question, considering he literally met with Xi Jinping himself. Why did he take a $250 million loan from China? Is China the world leader in finance? Like, what were the terms there? What ongoing ties does he have to China? Those aren't conspiracy questions. Those are genuine fact-finding accountability questions that you vet someone before you put him in charge of the country. This guy just popped up here after a decade away. We don't know so many basic details about him, and the CBC will do anything to keep it that way.
Well, what an utter absolute failure of media. The fact that you could just, both of us could just come up with a dozen questions that we would easily want to know and ask the prime minister. Millions, and I think tens of millions of Canadians would agree that those are important issues that should have been featured in this campaign. What a total abdication of responsibility by the media. I hope Pierre Poilievre wins this election just so that he can blow up the status quo and have a shakeup, allow for different ideas and different opinions to be coming in. Just the final point I want to make about this election and ask you about, Ezra, is we've now seen that the primary emotion driving Liberal voters is fear. The primary emotion driving Conservative voters is hope for the future, optimism for change. That's kind of a flip of how the election usually is, or at least the media try to pretend and accuse the Conservatives of running on hate and division and using dog whistle, all this nonsense, whereas this time it's actually the case. But I think the Liberal attitude around the campaign shows that they're losing. You know, the fact that Terry Gillon assaulted your reporter outside the Debates Commission last week. I mean, this is a campaign that is like flailing out of control, spiraling in negativity. The viral image of the Brantford boomer, I think, is an actual Liberal campaign worker with the double middle finger at an independent journalist for daring to just be at a Mark Carney event. And she's not the only one with having that experience. You know, there were multiple images of older, angry Liberal supporters or staffers. You know, they're really kind of angry and deranged. And then you contrast that with Pierre Poilievre, who, you know, he's been getting big union endorsements. The former Liberal Premier of British Columbia, Gordon Campbell, just came out and endorsed him. Moses Simner, the Canadian Association of Retired Persons. Like, he's building this sort of optimistic coalition. I think that they have the momentum going into the final stretch. They've closed the gap, right? At one point earlier in the campaign, the Liberals and Mark Carney were up by 10, 12 points. Now, by most accurate, honest pollsters, it's neck and neck, like a tie maybe. I think that Carney has lost this election. It's just a matter of who's going to get the minority. Is it going to be Liberals? Is it going to be Conservatives? Mostly, how is that vote going to be distributed? Final thing is early voting. My husband and I went out and took part in the advanced poll voting. And record Elections Canada say a record 7.3 million Canadians voted in the advanced polling, which means that we might get the most, we might set a new record, Ezra, for the highest voter turnout ever. So I think Canadians agree this is an incredibly important election, and really it's like which path we're going down: fear and anger and the double middle finger towards others, or this campaign of optimism and hope for the future and sort of restoring the Canadian promise. What do you think?
Yeah. David Coletto is one of my favorite pollsters. He's with a polling company called Abacus. And he had a tweet the other day that I thought was fascinating. He said, is it true that the Liberals have lost a 12 or 15 point lead in a month? To believe that, you have to believe that they ran a horrible campaign, or the Conservatives ran a terrific campaign, or, he posited, is this response bias to pollsters? Let me translate into plain English. David Coletto, a pollster, is saying that people were not telling the truth to pollsters. And I had to Google response bias because I didn't really know what it meant. It means things like you want to tell the pollster what you think is socially acceptable, or there's a peer pressure going on, so you'll say one thing on the phone, but you'll mark it an X on a ballot differently. I thought that was a very interesting thing for a pollster himself to say, because I think he was trying to say, how did this swing so much? And I think it's so there's a drumbeat. You've got to support Carney. You must hate Trump. It's just fascinating to me. I wonder if the large turnout is people saying, whoa, this is there's some hoodwinking going on here. I don't know. I am nervous about it, but I know that the Liberals are dark. Let me tell you a super quick story. Remember Buttongate? About 2 weeks ago, the Liberals were caught handing out fake Trump-like political buttons at a Conservative event to sort of plant them on Pierre Poilievre, as if Poilievre was saying Trump-like slogans like "Stop the Steal" or "Lock him up." This was part of the Liberal messaging strategy that Pierre Poilievre is a mini Trump. You can't trust him to deal with Trump. He's just like Trump. So this was a total campaign effort to smear Poilievre as being in Trump's pocket. So the dirty tricks part was planting these buttons at a Conservative function. It was only because their election staff were loudly boasting about it in a bar, they were overheard by actually a CBC reporter. I don't know if you know this, Candice, but I actually own the trademark to one of the buttons that was used, "Make Canada Great Again." If you could believe it, I trademarked that a few years ago. So they stole my property as part of their campaign dirty tricks. So I'm suing the Liberal Party for trademark violations. I'm suing the Liberal Party and John Doe's 1 and John Doe 2. I want to know who did it. I want to know, did this go to the top? I suspect it did, Candice, because this was a total campaign strategy, and Mark Carney said he didn't fire the malefactors. He called it, quote, totally unacceptable, but then he said he, quote, reassigned them. Really? So my lawsuit obviously will not be heard before the election, but I intend to pursue it. First of all, I want to enforce my property rights. You can't steal Make Canada Great Again. We trademarked that. We're selling hats, etc. But I want to know who did it. And I think that they're lying about it. I think Mark Carney pretends to be an ethical, gentlemanly guy, but I think he will do anything to win, and the Liberals around him will do anything to win. Gerald Butts, Katie Telford, it's Justin Trudeau's old crew, all of it. So I just wanted to tell you that little story. They are dirty tricksters. They accuse Conservatives of being rough. They're the dirty tricksters, the Liberals themselves.
Wow, Ezra. Well, that's interesting. We're going to have to follow up with you on that lawsuit. Good for you for filing it. And hey, we really appreciate your time and your insights, Ezra. And thank you. You've really charted the way for independent media. I really mean it. We wouldn't be here at Juno News or at True North without your sort of leadership in this field. So keep up the great work, and good luck with the lawsuit.
Thanks for those very kind words. You keep up the fight.
All right. Thank you so much. It's Ezra Levant, founder and leader of The Rebel. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. We'll be back again tomorrow with all the news. I'm Candice Malcolm. This is the Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you, and God bless.